Hello and welcome back to Matt Hayes' Tottenham Blog and to what is going to be an important discussion about the European Super League. I'm joined by JCC, John Charles, a Fulham fan, and Hal from the Sheffield United way to discuss what this means. We'll be joined by George Achillia as well very, very shortly to talk a lot about this in terms of the proposal itself, what it means for the small clubs as well as the big clubs, or the so-called big and small clubs, and where we go from here. But first, before we get started, John and Hal, absolute pleasure having you on today. How are you doing?
Yeah, all good. Thanks for having me.
I'm good. Yeah, John, this is a bit of a niche reference, but John looks like the Eye of God from Full Metal Alchemist, which I like.
Yeah, you like that face cam. It's not working. I don't know why. I just said to Matt, I can't get it to work, but I am here.
Well, telling you, anyone who gets that Full Metal Alchemist reference is having a really good time right now, because that's a very clever joke.
I'm getting started with those jokes very, very early on. I expect nothing less. But look, before we do get into this discussion, make sure to smash that like button if you're as annoyed as we are. Or I haven't heard these guys' opinion yet. If you're annoyed as I am about this European Super League, and we'll get into their opinions very, very shortly. But look, I suppose let's dive into it now. Hal, off the bat, straight up, how do you feel about the European Super League?
I'm really excited because Sheffield United might get a reprieve. We might not be relegated. So that is good.
I knew you would get in this straight away.
Thing. I don't care about a European Super League. I wouldn't watch it. I wouldn't have any interest in it, and I wouldn't respect any fan who carried on supporting their club if they went off the clubs and actually did this European Super League. It's not going to affect Sheffield United, so it's not one I'm hugely worried about in terms of, what's going to happen to us. I just want us to stay in the Premier League, and I don't want these six, if they do go for it, to be in the Premier League. But what I really hope overall is it just doesn't happen. I take Sheffield United going down for a Super League not to happen, for the pyramid of football to remain how it is, and for the integrity of the game.
Right, I couldn't agree more with you, Hal. And look, before we go on any further, we've got Thomas Bell and Anonymous asking where was JCC. The face cam isn't working, but we've got his knowledge and insight instead. And before we get John's thoughts on this, we can welcome George Achillia to the stream as well. George, thanks for joining us today. How are you getting on?
I'm good, guys. How you doing? Well, good as it can be, should I say.
Yeah, it's been a crazy couple of days. But look, George, we'll get to you in a second. But first of all, John,
of course.
As a Fulham fan, how does this whole thing make you feel?
Yeah, it's weird, right? I was obviously been so locked into it with social media and making the video I made on it today and everything. And then when I was walking to the gym today, I was just walking in the sunshine and I was like, is football ruined? Like, is football done? Like, is the sport ever going to be the same? I obviously, like, very similar to Hal, it's a bit weird for us as in Fulham because I think we're down anyway now. And I think, like, are we going to stay up? So I'm kind of looking forward to hearing that side of what happens, but ultimately I would rather go down and take my chances in the Championship than see this happen. It's a weird day. I think it's one of the most historic days ever for football. 24 hours, 48 hours.
Yeah, it really does feel like that. I remember sitting in work yesterday when the news first broke on this. I saw it on Get French Football News, a page on Twitter. It's like, oh, that's funny to think that'll happen. And here we are, like 24 hours later, and we're in a situation where it genuinely seems as though football could be dead. But George, it's been for Spurs, I suppose, a more tumultuous day than it has for any other side. With Jose Mourinho, of course, losing his job as well this morning. How, as a Spurs fan, are you feeling?
I don't know what to feel today, to be honest with you. Like, quite genuinely, like I've tweeted a few times. I just feel lost. Like, it was bad enough about the whole Super League stuff last night. I wanted to go to bed. Literally, like they were saying, 9:30 is going to be announced, then 10:30, then ended up being 10:45, right on the cusp. And I was thinking, you know what, I'm just going to go to bed. I ended up being up for like 3-4 hours, just more news coming out and out and out about it all, and just watching the whole chaos unfold. And then everything this morning, like sacking Jose in the morning, like I just feel kind of numb, to be honest with you. Like, I don't really know what to think. It's just crazy, ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the most poignant things to say, is that we just don't really know what to think, because we essentially don't know what's going on. And we're hearing Premier League are having an emergency meeting tomorrow with the 14 remaining clubs. Serie A, they had a meeting today, and all 20 clubs were present. And the AC Milan, Inter Milan, and Juventus said they want to continue in domestic leagues. And it seems as though the Serie A have agreed for that to happen. But UEFA are coming in and saying, well, we don't want to allow that to happen. It genuinely is. I think it's just a massive game of chicken right now. Who's going to back down first? But there's just so much money involved in the Super League, but there's so much tradition and heart and community involved in domestic football. And I suppose from me and you, George, from our point of view, I don't want to speak for you, but I feel ashamed.
Massively.
Our club,
I'm with you.
that our club has become this. And I saw a tweet a while ago saying, don't hate your club, hate the owners. And that, I suppose, is where we do need to be. But Hal, from an outside point of view, can you understand why the owners have gone for this, or do you think it is purely a financial reason? Do you think there's any footballing reasoning behind this?
No footballing reason whatsoever. Purely financial. Purely financial. They've the majority of the owners involved, bar obviously Real Madrid's Perez, a lot of the UK ones, should I say, are now American owners. If you look at Man United, Liverpool, a lot of them have taken inspiration from the NFL and all that, should I say. And it's these people that can't quite understand why relegation's a thing. And they were like, they wanted to eliminate the randomness of it, but that's just what makes it so exciting, is that you have your Ajaxes, your Atalantas, your Lyons, Spurs even getting to the final, like these Monaco when they had it as well, these crazy underdog stories which you will not see. Even if they did have the 5 qualified, let's be honest, the 15 that are there year in, year out, they're going to be getting 300 million every year, or even more when it comes to sponsorship. So they're going to have it consistently. And you're going to have far better power when one of getting the best players, because you'll say, oh yeah, you could join the other ones, but we're going to be here every year, so come to us instead. So even if the teams do come up, and as well as that, with the current Champions League format, you only play, 6 matches in the group, and then you're in the knockouts. Whereas with the new format, you'd have to play, 9 times, home and away?
Yeah.
It's going to cancel out all of the underdog stories, because they will get weeded out with more fixtures against the bigger teams rather than just like one-off matches. So it ruins all of that kind of like fairy tale story that a lot of fans love to see and want to see. And I think eventually down the line, if it just keeps on with this franchise sort of style that they're aiming for, it's going to eliminate rivalries as well. There will be fans in 20 years that will be like, oh yeah, I support Spurs, but you know what? I think that Arsenal team's pretty decent as well. I like them. Like that's going to happen, because these fans, like maybe like our kids or whoever else, they will grow up just only knowing about the Super League, and they'll think, oh yeah, that's cool, and they'll start just following players rather than teams, like the NBA and a lot of NFL fans do. I think it's just the death of football as we know it from the fans. And you see from their statements, they call us legacy fans. Like they don't care about us. They said they care about the future fans of the sport, which are the people that will pay the money. That's what they care about. They don't care about how we feel about it or whatever. They just know that there is someone worldwide that will pay the TV bill to watch it or go to the game. Maybe they'll start hosting them in America just to reach a bigger audience. Like so much of this will start happening and will start to unfold if this is allowed to continue, and it will just ruin the fan side of things massively and ruin the culture of football.
Yeah, one of the biggest concerns there for me that you brought up is that these games, I think, John, you mentioned this in your video earlier, you could have United against Arsenal or United against Liverpool played in Beijing or in Qatar or in America and everywhere except England. Yes. And Hal, I'll come to you in this next point, because George there brought up the whole underdog story. As Adam Phillips says, we Spurs were one of those underdogs, but Sheffield United last season came so close to getting into the Europa League, and perhaps if it wasn't for the break in the season, that could have been very different. But if, imagine in a couple of years, Sheffield United are back in a scenario where all this goes ahead, if you do make it into the Europa League, would it mean as much to you?
No, it's a terrible shame. I was thinking this earlier, that last season is probably as good as it'll ever get for a Sheffield United fan. And that's really, really depressing. And you've mentioned it's the Super League, isn't it? I think looking at the stuff I was reading online, it's actually not even called the European Super League. It's just known by the creators as the Super League, which is even more worrying, because that mean it could eventually open up to Chinese teams 100%. Or MLS teams, or maybe super teams created in the United Arab Emirates, because it will just all be about the bottom line and the money.
Just very quickly, that's why I think a lot of these Red Bull teams are going to join. RB Leipzig, RB Salzburg, New York Red Bulls. I'm not being funny. Red Bull as a company will be all over this sort of tournament. Worldwide, get the sponsorship going, all sorts. They'll definitely want to get their teams involved from an ownership point of view, because they've technically been brought up like the cities and the menus, just with money from not menu, sorry, but just with money from an energy drink rather than an oil rig. So I can definitely see, like you said, like global teams starting to come into it, because it's not just a European thing, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a point I thought of, and it's something that worries me just that little bit more about this whole thing. But John, we'll come to you here. JL has a question. He says, do you guys think the threat of a complete fan boycott and a subsequent lack of income would change the owner's mind? Do you think they're even worried about the current fans pulling out?
I think it's all we can do. I think it's all we can do, as well as have conversation. If you're a fan of these clubs, you guys are a fan of the big six clubs, it's care because it's so early. You don't want to have too big of an instant reaction to everything. But immediately, the way I've been thinking for 24 hours is empty stadiums. When fans are allowed back in, don't go. Anfield can be empty for a year. See what that does to the brand. See what that does to the image. See what it does when Tottenham fans stop going. You're still going to probably have people go. Ultimately, you are going to have people go. But even if it's half full or a quarter full, that's kind of all we've got, right? What else can we do other than protest and hope that governing bodies and legislations block this from going through, so it doesn't ruin the sport?
I think the problem is they've definitely factored that in. They know for a fact that there'll be people rioting and not wanting to go, and that's probably part of the whole 3.6 billion rising to 10 billion that they're going to give the clubs. Like that is effectively like them saying, all right, we understand you might lose some money because fans might not want to turn up, and obviously you lost some from COVID. Here, we'll give you billions across the 23 years to stay afloat until the new fans come in. So to be honest with you, I really do not think they give a flying F about.
No, you're right, and that's the problem. When does Tottenham stop being Tottenham? When does Liverpool stop being Liverpool? It probably stops being, Liverpool stops being Liverpool when they start playing the majority of their games around the world. Yeah. They're not Liverpool anymore, and this is just a very, very dangerous and worrying step one, isn't it? And I think ultimately, you're right, George, when you say it's leading towards this. 20 years time where you can have all these other teams spring up. Red Bull will be all over it, all these clubs all over it. And yeah, very, very worrying for fans like you guys as well, who have grown up with these clubs and now they're just sort of abandoning you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a super chat here from Paul Markey coming in with the €5. Paul, thank you so much for that. You're an absolute legend. Says, my worry is will these franchises be transferable to other cities as it does in the NFL? And look, I think that is a big concern. Now, I won't claim to know too much about American sports, but what I can see from all this is that the entire scenario does seem to be almost an Americanization of European football. It's going that in that direction. And look, if any of you are familiar with the NFL and you want to chime in on this one, please go ahead. But for me, my biggest concern is if we lose the transfer window. If it does become a draft like they have in the NFL, I think they have it in the NBA as well. Like for me, one of my big loves in football is transfers. Anyone who watches this channel knows that I have a passion for transfers and talk about who Spurs might sign, who we might sell, and all that. And this whole idea of becoming more like the NFL and stuff like that is a big concern for me. Are any of you familiar with the NFL system?
Yeah, I think the thing is, right, the whole NFL and NBA system, I think, works for America because that's how they set them up initially. So they've always had it in the sense, well, I think as far as I'm aware, they've always had it that you kind of go to college. You've got to go to college to play at a college level before you can get drafted in to the NFL or NBA. So they've always had that system. It's not really transfers until you get to a certain level of being a professional. Whereas obviously what we've always had is like you grow up through academies and you sign for maybe your local academy if you're good enough, and then you could join others if they release you and this, that, and the other. And then you're maybe bought as a teenager from other clubs. For this whole sort of NFL way we're trying to go with this European Super League, it doesn't work without that whole draft system, go to college and whatever, like having teams just stay in a closed shop. Because like we're seeing as the problems now, governments are trying to block transfers from international teams. If UEFA are banning players from being in like the World Cup Euros, well, they can definitely stop the ones in, say, Leicester, stop players from Leicester joining Spurs. Because they'll just say, no, you can't go across competitions. How will that work? And there's so many other logistical things like, okay, well, if we can't, because who are the Super League teams going to pay? We can't pay the clubs directly because the UEFA won't allow it. They'll say, no, you're not allowed to do the transfer. So what might happen is, and I'll predict this a lot, is I think we'll start seeing a lot more release clauses in players' contracts because that's not really too much of a thing in the UK compared to places in like La Liga. But the reason they have it in La Liga is because their system is built on the clubs will pay the player to buy out their own contract. And that's how they do the transfers. And that's what's going to probably happen because of the two different organisations. We'll have, say, just an example, say Vardy from Leicester signs a new contract and has a 40 million release clause. Well, now what, say, Spurs can do, for an example, is we'll just pay Vardy directly 40 million to buy out his own contract. Then he's effectively a free agent with no job, and we technically take him on a free. That's how the transfers will start working if the governing, if the like UEFA and FIFA and whatever, if they block the transfers. So that's going to be like a huge change in all of players' contracts and things like that. There's just so much to it that's just, it's just crazy. The whole thing is changing. The whole thing from top to bottom is changing right in front of our eyes.
I absolutely agree with you, and it's interesting that you bring up the whole kind of process of La Liga transfers, because like you said, essentially that is the player themselves will get the money from the club they'll pay out. I think they'll have to go to La Liga headquarters and buy out their own contract and then essentially go on a free transfer, but of course it's obviously costs a lot of money. And Hal, we've JL here in the comments saying Klopp's being interviewed now on Sky Sports and he's not best pleased. We've seen protests at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, at Anfield and at Old Trafford today, and as the Liverpool players were arriving at Ellen Road for their clash with your beloved Leeds tonight, there were fans screaming abuse at the players and the coach. But what I want to say is Thomas Tuchel was interviewed earlier today in his press conference and he said he and the players did not know about this. They were not involved in the decision making. I think Mikel Arteta said something similar. How do you think the players and the managers will feel in a situation like this, given the potential repercussions?
I think they'll be worried. I mean, Klopp not happy. It makes the 3 subs thing that he was kicking off about with Sheffield United look like chicken feed, but he's never happy, so who cares? The thing that we are all united now because we're all in agreement as football fans. That's quite nice. We're normally all arguing with each other and we all hate each other.
First thing ever to do that.
Yeah, and we've all come together at this time during a pandemic. And do you know what? That's what the only positive thing that has come out of this. And let's just focus on a positive, because I'm a positive thinker. I'm going to try and think of something else positive for you Tottenham fans, which is if you're part of this 6 that goes away to do this Super League, soon to be part of China and Dubai, you can effectively earn a great deal more money than the clubs that aren't part of it. And it would, in effect, if you do remain in the domestic league as well and play this Super League on your mid-week games, as is the proposal, and the Premier League balk at their decision to kick the Big 6 out, because let's be realistic, they're not going to do that. It's all smoke. They need them. You'll be like 180 million ahead of everyone else trying to compete for any player, and the Big 6 will get bigger. And teams like mine and Fulham, Johns, we will never be in reach. And at the moment, it's a chasm, but it's going to become impossible for teams like ours to actually compete in the Premier League if we even get back there. So actually, maybe you could look at it as a good thing for Tottenham if you're interested in that kind of level of greed. Personally, I think it would ruin the competition.
No, exactly. It's definitely the thing that is pretty much the only positive for Spurs. But again, as like a football fan, your morals have to come first. Like that is just going, like you said, that's just going to ruin the whole pyramid of football. Like there's already enough inequality with the lack of cap on spending that cities and Chelsea's and whatever can do. Like we've already got a gap to them, but now from us to everyone else, like you said, ginormous, and is a leap that no one's ever going to make. And it's the point I was before, like even the 5 teams that do qualify, they might make it for 1 year, they might get the money for 1 year, but clubs like us and Man United and whatever would have had years upon years of getting 300 million. We can get players and say to them, look, Everton say they might get it in 1 year because they won the Premier League, but we're going to be it every single year. To join us instead, we'll have that power, and that's just going to create huge inequality between the clubs. Like more so than it already is.
It makes me feel sorry for teams like Leicester, who have over the last 5 years really established themselves in that top 6. They are a good side, and they have worked their way up. And now it's like just a huge. They've just been chucked out the club straight away. Like no, that's the reason. You're not coming in. You're not coming in.
Well, the other way of looking at it is, if the Premier League have some balls and do kick the 6 out, Leicester will probably win the league.
I know, but I completely agree with you. They're not going to kick him out. I think if they were going to kick him out, they would have said something straight away about it. They would have said, "You've got 48 hours to reverse your decision, or you're removed from the league," or something like that. They're not going to do it.
They're not that brave.
They'll never do it. They'll never do it, which is a shame. It's a shame, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think there was a discussion in your mod chat last night, John, that there's just so much fake news coming out last night. Like nobody really knows what the potential repercussions will be, and all that one. And there's is a comment here which a lot more to do with Spurs and the European Super League. But Kieran Spittery has said that Alistair Gold has confirmed that Spurs are going for Nagelsmann. So some big news there in Tottenham's managerial pursuit. Will Julian Nagelsmann be the next man in charge? We'll talk a little bit about that more on a later stream, but I want to continue talking about the European Super League. Kieran, thank you for bringing us that news. And look, I agree. I think there's too much money in these big six clubs for the Premier League to take them out and stuff. With the Yid Kid here coming in with a $1 super chat. Thank you so much for that. You're an absolute hero. Always really appreciate every single super chat. But like looking at this and what this could mean for fans is a big concern, because I think if we've learned anything over the last year and a half, it's fans make football. Without fans, football is absolutely nothing. And we're talking about, George, you're saying they're calling us legacy fans, and they're looking forward to the future fans and that. But what is a fan anymore? What are we? Like, are we someone who bought a match program at the stadium 2 years ago? Are we someone who wears a jersey at home? This is, like you were saying, an Americanization of this, and will people be jumping between clubs and things like that? George, where do you think football is going in terms of the kind of the fan base and what this could actually mean to people?
I think, obviously, if say everything goes ahead as planned, as they want it to, I think that as much as they can say they're going to pump money into the other pyramids of the teams and like the Premier League and lower teams and whatever. I mean, we've heard that whole spiel from the FA, from the UEFA, and from FIFA. A lot of people complain that the FA haven't done a very good job at grassroots football in this country. And they probably haven't, to be honest with you. It's only in recent couple of years that they've actually started to put more money into it. And it's a load of bollocks. It's just them just trying to look positive. They're like, oh yeah, we're going to give these major clubs 3.6 billion, and we'll give the grassroots some as well. We'll give them a little bit just so they can just do their stuff. But at the end of the day, we're giving these lot the big bucks, so come watch them instead. And it's just going to get to the point where I don't necessarily think football's dead in the fans. In terms of it's not like people are going to just stop watching Sheffield or stop watching Fulham or stop watching whoever. I'm sorry, Sheffield United, should I specify?
I mean,
know that can be quite...
I knew if we'd been in the same room, I would have punched you in the...
No, I keep forgetting that's a big thing. So that's my bad. But you see my point, though. I think people will still support like the lower teams and things like that. But the reality is, in maybe 20 years, 30 years, all of the sponsorship money is going to go into the Super League teams and this, that, and the other, because that's the viewership's going to be in that league worldwide. And even if you're a team in the Premier League that will still be around, it's not going to be as attractive, because look at the size of the fan base of Man United, Real Madrid, and Barcelona. And then you've probably got Liverpool close behind them as well. Like, I'm not being funny. They're going to focus on promoting things where these teams are. And eventually down the line, the smaller clubs are just going to lose money. People will forget about them, and all the focus will just be on these 20 teams that are in this Super League, like the NFL and NBA is. Everyone only cares about the NFL and NBA. And I know over in America, a lot of this is why I'm saying the whole system needs to work for this to work like it does in America, because a lot of Americans would say they actually follow like the college football more than they do the NFL, because they support their kind of local university and their local college. But we don't have that. You're not going to go to like a University of Nottingham game and support them, sort of thing. It's just the case of you have your team, and that's your team, and that's normally your local one. So when it feels like all of the other teams are just going to be left totally behind, and the worldwide fan base are only just going to focus on these 20 teams, which means everyone else is going to suffer. Yeah, I don't know how they're going to be able to progress. And like you said before, like if you can't get into the competition, even if you get top 4 in the Premier League and you get to the normal Champions League, if you're not one of these 12 teams, okay, realistically, in terms of a worldwide perspective, who cares? Because they're just going to say, no, I'm watching the Super League instead. If you've got a fan from wherever, Mexico, I don't know, just to follow the country that like, then that means you're not going to get the money, because people aren't going to care, people aren't going to watch it. There's not going to be sponsors, because they know that people aren't going to watch it as much, and the clubs will just start to fall apart. And we've already seen what COVID has done to teams like Bury and Bolton and all sorts. Like that could happen over a longer period of time with this introduction of this league, and it's just going to kill so many clubs.
Yeah, and that's something I kind of wanted to bring up, as you mentioned there, the likes of Bury and Bolton. But first of all, Thomas Bell here is saying this could well mean fans start supporting local non-league sides. And like I agree with you, but I'd argue that for so many people, Tottenham is their local side. Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal is their local side. And it goes back to John's point, when does Manchester United stop being Manchester United? Because it has nothing to do with Manchester anymore. It's become a global corporation rather than a local club. And Hal, we'll come to you on this one. Talking about Bury and Bolton, the sides who go into this European Super League will be entitled to a share of a pool of €3.5 billion. We're looking at so many clubs facing extinction. The National League for the second season in a row being made null and void. There's so many clubs, so many livelihoods, traditions, family-run businesses in risk of complete extinction. And this elitist mentality is leading to these 12 clubs sharing this massive pool of money and saying, we give a bit back. Do you think there's any excuse or any reason to forgive that?
I mean, for me personally, no, but you can see that the people involved in this big decision would look at it simply as well. Cheltenham don't draw the same crowds as Chelsea. There's more money in Chelsea. So why it's not our responsibility to save Bury, Bolton, Plymouth, Oldham, whomever. And it actually isn't. They would be looking purely as businessmen and women at the bottom line. And they know that they can get a return and get, in fact, more money back by investing in clubs that has been proven over the past 50 years, make a great deal more money. People don't even fill up the stadiums for these clubs in League Two, the non-league, and some in League One. And it's sadly the case that there isn't, I don't believe, and I see this every day with my nephew, who's growing up in Buckinghamshire, and he wants to support Manchester United, and he's 6. And he's never been to Manchester in his life. He's got no connection to Manchester in any way, shape, or form. And he's got a Sheffield United mad uncle. My sister, his mum, supports Sheffield United. My parents, his grandma and grandpa, support Sheffield United. And we will regularly take him to Sheffield. He supports Manchester United. And he's got Man United everything, and he's obsessed. He is the generation they're interested in. He is going to grow up just loving football, and he won't really care because he's too young now to kind of know. He won't even know there wasn't ever a Premier League back in 1991. And actually there was talk, and I'm older than all of you, I'm sure. I remember the Premier League coming in, and it was similar to talks to what we're talking about now. Not quite as terrifying, but people were saying, this is the death of football. I remember it being said. And the Premier League was seen as a big bad thing. I think we can all agree the Premier League has actually been pretty good for football and made what was English football a good league the best league in the world. So there is a part of me, maybe 0.0001%, that thinks this Super League might be a good idea. But again, that's a very small part.
I think just the very big difference. I know, like you said, like people were obviously drawing similarities of the people's feelings back then, saying it was like a disaster. And I know my dad keeps reminding me saying, yeah, everyone thought it was a terrible idea, and it's good for football. But the difference is they still kept to the structure. It's like anyone could get into the Premier League, anyone could get relegated from the Premier League, and all 20 teams have an equal say in what's going on. So that's the difference. It's still sticking to the roots of football, and all it really kind of actually eventually meant was that more money was coming into football. And I think that's what people were probably just scared about. They were like, oh yeah, money's just going to come in and it's going to ruin this, that, and the other. But money's not necessarily a bad thing. It can increase the quality of the game, but at least they stuck to the structure, and it's anyone's game. If you get there, you've got to fight to stay in there.
This is going to be totally dull. This is going to be quite boring.
Where this is totally different is that you've got 15 teams it's supposed to be. That's exactly the same every year, always getting the money. They will have equal say. The 5 qualifiers will have no say in any decision whatsoever because they will be regarded as, you're not going to be here next year, maybe. So who cares about your thought? We're the founders. We're the ones that are here now. So it's going to be totally up to this monopoly of 15 teams of what happens and where the money goes and where this is distributed and what's that and the other. And I think it's a totally different scenario where we've now gone from, all right, the Premier League's giving 20 teams money. This Super League is giving 15 teams a monopoly in world football, which is going to cause chaos amongst the smaller teams.
Yeah. And Hal touched on it. George, you touched on it as well. The Premier League is the best league in the world. And that's the reason we have 6 teams going into this Super League compared to 3 and 3 and 2 and all this sort of stuff. That's what I talk about today in my video. I feel like, even though I have such little connection, I'm a Fulham fan in the Premier League, I feel like we've been taken for mugs here as the Premier League. Like, La Liga won a bit of the Premier League. Serie A won a bit of the Premier League. These teams look at the Premier League. They see the stadiums full for West Brom, Burnley. They see the TV deals. They see the big 6 compared to the big 2 in Spain, or the big 1 in Germany, or the big, I guess it's been Juventus for 10 plus years only in Italy. They won a bit of that. And we've sort of gone, oh, okay, and we've sort of shared it out for them for no reason. Instead of, I just think it's like, if you're Real Madrid and Barcelona in £1 billion worth of debt, Barcelona got Messi about to, sell or retire on £1 million a week. They're in a club in turmoil. Real Madrid leaning on the government constantly for their money to keep themselves as the Galacticos. They've been bailed out with this. They now have been bailed out. They've now got a product which is going to make them rich, save them all of their embarrassments of their debts, and teams in the Premier League, I don't think needed it. I really don't think they needed it. It's just, from our point of view, especially, it's pure greed, which has been going around everywhere from the Premier League. It's just greed.
You know what I find funny is that it's literally like I was saying at the start, like the convenient timing of everything. Because if it's 100% just these clubs protecting themselves, if you think about all of the ones involved, funny how like Chelsea and Man City were the ones that were reluctant to be involved, when the reality is they're the ones that are just fine. They're totally fine. City are going to win the league every year. They've got all the money. Chelsea, Abramovich can pump in as much as he wants. He doesn't care. They're fine. And they've been doing pretty well in the league or across Europe in the past few years. So nothing's really happened to them. That's probably why they're more reluctant. Whereas you look at Real Madrid, like you said, all the debt. But not even just that. Without Zidane, their form in the league was disgusting and terrible. They had to bring him back because of it. Barcelona, like you said, on the cusp of losing Messi, also not performing in the league, allowing Atletico Madrid to come into it. Atletico Madrid probably just lost a lot of money, and they've also built a new stadium. Like almost all of these teams have built new stadiums or conveniently doing renovations in time for this. Juventus, this season, struggling, can barely hold to 4th in Serie A. Inter Milan finally coming back to 1st, but they haven't won the league in 10 years. AC Milan haven't been close for like 12 years, I think, or something like that. Like, all of these teams involved conveniently are really, really, really struggling and can see them. Sorry, I even forgot to mention Spurs, Arsenal, Man United. Massive decline. You can see how we've done it this year. Arsenal the past couple of years. Man United past few years as well. Ollie's only just kind of bringing them back up to par and getting closer, but the reality is Man United should be where Man City is, challenging for that spot. So all these teams involved are very conveniently on a massive decline, and they're just purely thinking, how can we save our clubs and screw everyone else over? Because like you said as well, Leicester, hot property on the way up, like teams like Atalanta coming through on like hot property on the way up.
Threats, aren't they? They're just threats.
They're threats that they're just trying to eliminate totally by not allowing them to come in. And
which is the opposite of sport.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just a utter disgrace.
Yeah, I fully agree with George, and fantastic points there made about the decline of the bigger clubs and how we feel threatened by that. And when I first saw the kind of format for this league, what kind of screamed out to me was it is essentially the Champions League, but the rich clubs are the ones that get to stay there every single season, and it's a way to solidify and a way to just make sure they are the team that are in the limelight every single season. They are the teams that everybody's essentially being forced to watch because it's the best football that's out there every single season. And there's nothing I want more than to see Spurs play the elite in Europe every year, because I want to see us be competing against the best, because to become the best, you have to beat the best. But I don't want to do it like this. I don't want to do it in a way that it is completely forgetting and leaving those smaller clubs behind. And, I think Mark Olbridge put it best when he was talking about this. He said, so we have what will eventually be 15 founding clubs, and then there'll be 5 clubs, not quite promoted, but that will qualify for it every single season. So imagine just for a second, Leicester win the Premier League in the first season of the Super League, and they get up into it for the following year. What if the bottom 3 or the bottom 5 in that competition is Tottenham, Arsenal, Atletico Madrid, Inter Milan, AC Milan? Leicester could finish 4th, 5th, 6th, and they still get eliminated from the competition. Yeah. They will still be kicked out of it, no matter how well they perform. And their performance in that European Super League could cost them their title of the Premier League, because they could underperform, be it through fatigue or whatever.
Yeah, there's a lot more matches.
In the Say goodbye to the FA Cup and the League Cup. I mean, they're gone.
League Cup 100% is gone. I think FA Cup will probably be saved because they need to. The FA will need a competition that involves lower league teams and give them a chance. I think That's more important. League Cup 100% is just gone if this goes ahead. Like that's the reality of it.
So the real losers here are Carabao.
yeah. That's what we can take from it.
Yeah.
Oh, Red Bull are laughing their heads off. Like, yeah, we'll get our teams into the Carabao. Yeah, forget them. Terrible energy drink.
Hal, I know you're a bit pushed for time. Do you need to head off, or have you a few more minutes?
Well, I'll give you a few more minutes. I will just say I forgot to put my light on when I sat down, so I'm starting to look not too dissimilar, of course, to just above my own image here. It'll be soon eclipsed in complete darkness. But yeah, no, of course, happy to stick around for a little bit longer.
Do you know what it feels like as a Spurs fan? It's like that. What was it? That Thanos meme. That's like, we've won, but at what cost? Sort of thing. And it's just like, that's what it feels like it's happened with like the sacking of Mourinho. It's like, we might get Nagelsmann in, but only because we're a part of this Super League and we're going to get 300 million to be able to get him, sort of thing, and attract him. It's like, great, we've got the manager we want, but the soul's been sucked out, so who cares anymore? Like, at what cost have we now got maybe the players in the summer that we might get, or the manager, sort of thing? It's just, it's a massive shame, the whole thing.
Yeah, and do you know what? I saw a tweet talk about the kind of the length of time it's been since the dirty dozen, as they're being called, since they've last won a league. And I'm sitting here and questioning, as a Spurs fan, I love the club more than anything. I really do. But how are we in this? That is my biggest question, because the length of time since the teams in there have last won a league title, for Spurs, it's been 60 year. For the other 11 teams combined, it's 64 years. They've
won it this century.
Yeah, we're the only one who hasn't. It's absolutely baffling. But George, a good question here by Asin, and it's one I've seen spoken about a lot. He says, "Hi lads, do you think you're going to be watching Spurs while they go into the league if it goes through? Will you still be a Spurs fan?"
This is where I'm like at a huge crossroads, and to be honest with you, I don't have a definitive answer, and I won't until we know exactly what's happening with the Super League, how it's going to work, if it's going ahead, whatever. Because the part of me, right, is like, I've dedicated my life to Spurs, and like watching Spurs is kind of like all I know in football, and I love football, and it's almost like a drug in the sense that you can't just switch off totally. There's no way I'm just going to be able to just totally walk away. That's that, because it's almost like me leaving as a fan will then prove that the billionaire owners have won, and it's just like, yeah, they don't care about us. On to the next.
I don't know. They'll want your money, and if you go and support someone else...
But this is my point, is that they're going to get money regardless. They're going to get money from the future fans regardless. And they don't...
They get a little bit more if you stick around.
Well, yeah, of course. And this is why, like, it's obviously a huge statement if we all just stop watching and not going and spending money. I think what will happen is I'll definitely end up dialing down in terms of going to games. Like, I normally vlog home and away for the past few years when we have been able to. It's been almost every single match. That's 100% going to stop. I'm not going to travel to Europe spending tens of thousands of years every single week just to watch the same team play over and over again, watch us get dicked by Real Madrid. Sorry for the language, but get like ruined by Real Madrid, whoever it is at the time. Like, I'm just not going to do that. I'm not going to spend my money and waste my time doing that.
Yeah.
So it's definitely 100% dialing back, but whether I stop, like, it's impossible.
Well, George, if you and Matt do want to look for a new club, you'd be made. A beautiful downtown Bramall Lane. You're already used to saying going to the lane.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Matt,
might have to change the colour of the kits before I'm persuaded, though, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, we've got a nice white away kit, but Matt, you would always be welcome on the Sheffield United way because you've got such a wonderful accent, and I love your hairline. So for those two reasons alone, you're always welcome to join us on the Sheffield United way.
Thank you, Hal. Appreciate that. Imagine that from Jose Mourinho to Paul Heckingbottom. Talk about a decline. But look, before we get the bottom line from these guys, there are 160 people watching right now, so please do smash that like button, and let's see if we can get to 75 before the stream is over. But Hal, we'll come to you first, and then we'll come to John. What's the bottom line? Where does football go from here? Is this it?
I want to throw this out to you guys, actually. I mean, in percentage terms, how much do you think this is actually likely to happen? Do you really think we are talking today on the precipice of the death of football as we know it, and a Super League is definitely going to happen? Or do you think there is a chance, particularly after this meeting tomorrow with the 14 clubs, that this never gets off the ground?
I think it will, to a degree, in the sense that from what I've seen in the response to the new Champions League format, it's kind of already begun, and we're already heading that way anyway. Because what I found strange, and obviously I only saw it from one source on Twitter, but it's a verified source that a lot of people seem to be crediting and saying was correct in the replies. Everything about in terms of the style of the new Champions League in 2024 is what was reported and leaked before, in terms of 36 teams, one long table of 36, but you get some seeded. You only play 10 matches or something like that. It's seeded. And then you do 1 to 8 go through, 9 to 24 do a pre-playoff to get to the knockouts. That's all fine. What they snuck in there this time, which I think is a response to the Super League, is that there will be spaces for elite clubs regardless of qualifying. So clearly what's happened is I think this is just one gigantic ploy just to be able to guarantee these teams Champions League football every year anyway. So I think we're technically seeing a Super League, just not to the degree that the Super League is in terms of the new Champions League reform. And we're just going to see, maybe it won't be 12 teams, but maybe it will be 6, 8 teams. We'll just be guaranteed Champions League every year.
The whole elite club thing. My dad was saying to me the other day that when he was at school, Burnley were the team that everyone supported because they were the elite club at the time. So it is cyclical. And of course, the first teams that really established themselves as elite, you'd look at Preston North End and Bolton Wanderers. So
even Sunderland, all the way back there.
Exactly.
Ginormous.
Who decides who is historically elite?
That's such an interesting point, because a lot of what they were talking about this, and I think it is down to the reason why Arsenal qualified, is that they were talking about the historical coefficient standings. Look, you can understand, fair enough, Arsenal been in the Champions League 20 years in a row or whatever, but then you look at Aston Villa, who've won the European Cup a number of times. Nottingham Forest are the same. Again, as a Spurs fan, again, I love them more than anything. I wish we were that team, but if you're looking at historical coefficient standings or historical performances in the competition, you'd have to argue there are teams that deserve to be in it more than us. And
I'm pretty sure Everton, Villa, all these teams have more trophies than we do.
Yeah, but boys, there's no merit here. It's not to do with deserving. It's just money.
Exactly.
It's just money.
It's the fact that we are the 8th richest club in the world. We've got a new stadium with an NFL deal, with capital extra summertime ball, with all this, that, and the other. And we're in London. That is the pure reason why we're involved in this, because of what Levy's managed to do with the club. It's got nothing to do with our history.
And that's what
it is, and it might be for some of the others. But for us, it's totally down to what Levy's done as a businessman over the past 10 years or so.
Yeah, that's where the worst. That's the worst of it for me. That's what it boils down to, is this elitism, which we've all talked about, but also the audacity of these clubs to think that they have some God-given right to be in place over the other teams who, you know, like we spoke about the Leicesters and these teams like West Ham fighting for Champions League places. They have some sort of right to just take their place in the most elite competition in the world of football, just because they got another O in the bank account. And it's like, at that point, for me, even as a Fulham fan, like looking at, that's why I completely detach myself from the competitions. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in the sport. Obviously, I'll watch Fulham, but in terms of if I was in like a position of being in these clubs, and that's why I think it's so difficult for you two guys, I'd just look at that and be like, I can't pretend to care. I don't stand for that. So why would I can't watch my team run out and know they're there based on money and nothing else.
Hey, John, I bet we never thought that two Tottenham fans would be jealous of us.
I know.
It's funny how the things change. We got Hey here coming in with a $2 super chat. Says, would the Premier League kick out the Big Sick? Thanks. Well, first of all, thank you very much again for the super chat. You're a hero. Massively appreciated. I personally, I think the four of us are in agreement that they won't do it because it will essentially just cost them too much money. And Hal, to answer your question, I think this is, like I said, just a big game of chicken. You know, who's going to back down first? And I think because the cards seem to be at the moment in the hands of the domestic federations and all that, I think we may see the European Super League, and I hope we may see them backing down sooner rather than later. But John, we get the bottom line from you. Where do you see football going from here? Do you think this is it, or do you think there's time for it to turn around?
Like I said I think just before we started the show, or maybe at the start of the show, this is the most historic day in football that I can remember, at least for as long as I've been alive. I think that, the Premier League formation and stuff before I was born was pretty big, but this tops it. And I think it's pretty dark. I think it's a pretty dark day. I think it's just everything that's wrong with society is kind of being shown in our favorite sport right now, football. It's just elitism. It's just, you're sort of born into it, then you got it. You can buy your way in. And it kind of goes against everything that I think really football stands for. I think it's a really bad day.
I couldn't agree more. It does seem.
I I just want to make this point quickly in terms of like teams being involved and stuff, just because while it's on top of my head. I know a lot of people are like joking around saying like PSG are like the heroes of like not joining all this stuff, but they have huge conflict with what the Super League's proposing, and obviously the backlash that FIFA and UEFA are saying, because the owners, the Qatari owners of PSG, are heavily invested in UEFA TV, and also with the Qatar World Cup coming up next year, they're also heavily involved with that. And obviously with all the threats that FIFA and UEFA are saying with these teams and players not being able to compete in the Qatar World Cup, it could ruin the whole thing. It could ruin the whole thing for them, being invested in those competitions. So I would genuinely not be surprised. You know how there's 3 extra spaces for founders? I think PSG have put theirs on reserve, because they were also one of the teams that were leaked to be involved beforehand. And I think they're saying, no, we don't want to be involved. Yeah, come on, UEFA, we got this. Woo! January 2023. Yeah, so we're joining the Super League now. Cheers. Thanks.
Yeah.
That's exact. I can 100% see that happening, because...
But aren't you all a bit sort of feeling sorry for the makers of Football Manager? This is going to be a nightmare for them.
This is going to be like a DLC that you got to download for the Super League. And it's like you got to pay extra for.
There's just no winners here, is there?
It's even just simple things like that. Like these teams and players won't be in FIFA 22. And all these extra licensings, you're going to see a Super League game coming out on PS5 and whatnot, and all this. It just
sounds so Americanized.
Yeah, it's a logistical nightmare and a pain in the arse, and it's just not going to be an enjoyable year.
Well, you're all welcome. Come to the dark side.
Look, if I'm ever up north, I'll pop in and say hello.
Brilliant. You're welcome.
Although I must say, my mum is from Sunderland, so I might have to have a little more leeway.
I'll lend you some red and white. You could flick between the two. No one will even notice.
But Joe Hal, if you keep signing Irish players, I think I may be joining you fairly soon. But look, we're going to wrap it up there. I've held these guys for longer than I said I would, so I do apologise for that. But it's been an absolutely incredible chat with these three people that I am absolutely delighted to have on the channel. 2 of you making your debuts, George and John, and of course Hal back again. Don't know why you keep coming back, Hal, but look, I appreciate it.
I think because realistically, I know we're probably not going to play you again for 100 years, so I better get on your channel now.
Fair enough. Last chance saloon. Look, links to all of these guys' YouTube channels will be down in the description below. And if you want to check out John World of JCC on Facebook as well, some fantastic pro clubs and Warzone streams there. You'll always find me in the live chat. Do make sure to go into that as well. To these 3 guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me for this very important chat. And to everyone who's tuned in, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe as you're going out. But for tuning in, thank you very much.
Thank you.